So something I just noticed recently about the Sonic series is just how inconsistent the voice cast really is. Especially the transition from Jason or Roger, it just felt like Sonic himself stayed the same visually while a different voice came out of him. Now, all this is pretty insubstantial, but it did make me think about who really got the worst end of this whole voice inconsistency. At first I thought it was Sonic for sure, but the more I thought of it, I think it's actually most evident with Tails. It's actually crazy to think about how many times he sounded completely different. I mean, growing up, I'd been most used to the 4Kids cast and loved Amy Pallant as the two-tailed fox, but it was more when I got older that after playing the Adventure Tile specifically, where the voice of Tails changing was really the most noticeable. I mean, 3 games back to back, and the voice in each respective title was completely different. Does Sega think we just don't notice or something? So this led me to think about some of the reasons the voice actors of Tails really didn't seem to stick, and for some reason got recast after each game, specifically in the Adventure era. So with the pondering question of why in mind, let's take a deeper look at the inconsistent voice of Tails the Fox. He's the best friend to the Blue Blur, and despite all of that, there's one thing he outranks him in other than his IQ, and that's voice actors. For one, Sonic has had 3 main substantial voice actors, going from Ryan Drummond to Jason Griffith and to most recently Roger Craig Smith. Now, do keep in mind I'm purely talking about the English cast here. Junichi's the go as always. As for Tails, his voice actor amount is double that with a whopping 6 different voices. But what really intrigues me is why were there so many voices in the first place? There was a factor with each voice actor, and today we want to get into that main single worded question answered, which is why? And honestly, today we're also going to be talking about how well does that voice fit the character themselves. So, who better to start with than the original and first voice of the two-tailed fox, Corey Bringas. Corey Bringas was one of the first voice actors to bring Tails to life, starting with Sonic Adventure in 1998. His portrayal came during a significant era for the Sonic franchise, transitioning from 2D to 3D gameplay, and at the time, Sonic games were undergoing a major transformation, and frankly, so was Tails' character. I mean, not to diss the actual classics, but there wasn't really a lot of character, which is the main thing we're going to be focusing on here. Corey was quite young when he took on the role, which helped bring a fresh and youthful energy to Tails, which is something I feel the games were trying their best to show in previous iterations of the two-tailed fox. One thing to definitely note here though is that Corey's voice for Tails was distinctively high-pitched and light, capturing the innocence and the youth of the character. His voice had a certain charm that matched Tails' young and eager personality, giving the character a sense of wide-eyed wonder and excitement. Moments like Tails acknowledging Sonic ignoring him, or just his fear of when Sonic mentions a monster working with Eggman being chaos, they were particularly fitting for Tails, who is often depicted as Sonic's enthusiastic sidekick, always ready for an adventure. Now, when it came to his performance, that is where things really pick up. Bringas' portrayal of Tails emphasized the character's youthfulness and sweetness. He delivered lines with a sense of sincerity that highlighted Tails' to be frank, optimistic nature. One of my most memorable moments with his version of Tails is in the opening cutscenes of Sonic Adventure 1, where Tails crashes the tornado plane and is rescued immediately by Sonic. The worry and then relief in Tails' voice as he interacts with Sonic makes the character feel genuinely childlike and relatable, which in my opinion is how he should be. Another standout moment is Tails' determination and bravery in the latter half of the game, where Bringas' voice adds a layer of depth to Tails as he grows more confident and independent. This is especially more apparent when it came to the climactic battle between Tails and Dr. Eggman, and how that single quote of Tails saying, "I can do this," and with the constant reassurance he gives himself, really emphasize how much the young fox has grown. This is especially where the townsfolk of Station Square validate Tails as his own standalone hero once defeating Dr. Eggman all on his lonesome. I would argue that this is where the main theme for Tails in Sonic Adventure adds more depth into his character. The track Believe in Myself is much more than what the song tries to present itself as. Its lyrics reflect his journey towards self-confidence and independence, and throughout the game, Tails learns to step out of Sonic's shadow and trust in his own abilities, making the song's message of self-belief highly relevant to his character development. The cheery and upbeat tone of the track mirrors Tails' youthful spirit and determination to prove himself as a capable hero in his own right, just as much as Sonic. Additionally, the song's emphasis on overcoming doubt resonates with Tails' growth from a timid sidekick to a brave adventurer. Believe in Myself captures the essence of Tails' character arc, highlighting his transformation from insecurity and moving to empowerment. Too bad a few years later, Sega decided to throw away that character development. Thanks a lot, Forces. Corey Bringas' portrayal of Tails set the tone for the character's voice in future games by establishing Tails as a young, cheerful, and brave character. Bringas helped shape how fans perceive Tails' personality, and going from some sprites and some wordless cutscenes like we see in the original Sonic 2, his personality is allowed to be fleshed out here thanks to Corey. The innocence and sincerity in his voice work adds layers to Tails, making him not just a sidekick but a beloved character in his own right. The unfortunate thing is that despite all these great moments that came with Bringas' version of Tails, He was recast shortly after, as sad as it is, because of the main fact that his voice was changing as he grew older, which is pretty common for young actors playing child characters. So while it's unfortunate that his time as Tails was brief, his portrayal left a lasting impact on fans, including myself, and set a high standard for future voice actors. Now, as we move on from one Bringas, let's move right into another, because ladies and gentlemen, that is exactly what Sega did when it talked about Sonic's next big title in Sonic Adventure 2. When moving on to Connor Bringas, he was most notably remembered as voicing Tails in Sonic Adventure 2, but he really took over the role of Tails from his older brother Corey for fucking Sonic Shuffle of all games, and continued to voice the character in other games during that period. Connor's transition into the role came as the Sonic franchise was evolving and expanding its cast of characters and games. His portrayal added a new dimension to Tails, and although refreshing, it wouldn't be easy for Connor as his brother frankly left some big shoes to fill. And before anything else, I do believe that Connor is the best we get to see out of Tails the Fox in the Adventure era. The main thing to encapsulate here is that Tails keeps his character development from the prior Sonic title, leaving Tails to be a lot more confident as a character overall, and Connor's voice establishes that perfectly. During the hero story in Sonic Adventure 2, Sonic is accused of doing things such as robbing a bank or destroying military buildings, and Tails can see right through this bullshit and immediately gets to work on freeing his best friend from wrongful imprisonment. Connor's performance emphasized Tails' bravery and intelligence, reflecting the character's growth and increased confidence. And while yes, he retained Tails' signature enthusiasm and charm, there was more of a nuanced delivery, and I think that showcased Tails as a more self-assured and capable character, reflecting his role as a hero alongside Sonic. And I actually think that's what made Connor such a lovable version of Tails, as I love the idea of him being more of an equal rather than having a sidekick role like what's been shown off in a lot of the other games. What made Connor such an improvement from his brother was especially helped by the emotional stakes of the story. Sonic at one point was presumed dead, only to then see that Tails had to step up to the plate and take action. But it's also not to say that his Tails is perfect. He still has moments of stupidity, and to be fair, he is still just a kid.
Whoa! You thought you could trick me with that fake emerald, didn't you?
So, how did you know it wasn't the real one?
Tails! Because you just told me, Fox Boy.
This not only again exemplifies his character more, but with the amazing performance by Connor, it helped in that instance as well. Sonic seeing the growth of his friend allowed for him to completely confide in him to keep fighting the good fight without knowing if he was going to make it out of this alive. And Tails not only continues to show that he has the confidence gained from the prior title, but is frustrated and has no hesitation in his voice to show that he can do this.
Now we have some unfinished business to take care of. If you give me the real emerald, I will release you both. You have my promise.
Sonic!
Huh?
Sonic has asked me for the first time to do something for him. I won't let him down. I won't give up!
The music in the background during this specific scene perfectly exemplifies how much Tails can trust himself as his own hero and to not fail, but it also leads me into my next point. Just like Corey, I'll be talking about the music here and how that plays some cues into Tails' character and how it adds more depth to him in SA2. It once again is titled Believe in Myself, however the lyrics are changed to be a lot more confident and strong in the sense that Tails has finally grown some backbone and really come of age. I think if there was a voice that helped encapsulate that perfectly, it would definitely be from Connor Bringas, thus easily making him one of the best voices for the Two-Tailed Fox, and honestly, it's a shame he was recast so soon after such a phenomenal and memorable performance. I also did try my best to look online and I really couldn't find an exact reason, so I may just go with the fact that just like his brother, being a child actor really just got him recasted really quickly. And by the way, I thought I'd quickly mention, if you find yourself enjoying the video so far, please be sure to press that subscribe and like button as it's always greatly appreciated. So after two Bringas voices back to back, which both did phenomenal in their own way, we move into our next voice actor with William Corkery in Sonic Heroes. When we shift our focus to William Corkery's portrayal of Tails in Sonic Heroes, it's clear from the start that this is a very much different take from what we saw with Connor Bringas in Sonic Adventure 2. I mean, for one, his voice is honestly annoying as fuck, but that's not the worst thing ever. One main thing to note is that William took over the role of Tails as the franchise transitioned into more team-based gameplay, and as such delivered a performance that, while not as nuanced as Connor's or Corey's, still brought its own flavor to the Two-Tailed Fox. His voice embodied a younger, more innocent version of Tails, which I'm honestly not a big fan of, but it's not because that the performance itself is bad, it's more so that this kind of version of Tails really doesn't suit the character in my opinion. You see, Sonic Heroes took a step back from the darker, more emotionally driven narratives of the Adventure series and focused on more teamwork and simplicity, so the voice given to Tails here feels a much more like a classic sidekick role again, rather than playing into that youthful spirit that we saw from the earlier games. This is honestly something I'm not too big on. Tails is a character who has been a part of the Sonic series for literal years at this point, so I don't understand why Sega feels the need to constantly regress his character in this way, and I really do believe that this is the very start of when that really began to happen, all the way up to when we see him in later titles like Lost World and Forces. Some might argue that Corkery's portrayal of Tails reflects a version of the character that's still growing and learning, but I instead feel it highlights a step back in terms of his development. Rather than building on the confidence he showed in Sonic Adventure 1 and 2, this portrayal diminishes that growth, emphasizing his reliance on Sonic and Knuckles in the team dynamic instead of allowing him to stand out and be independent, capable of the character that he had become. The portrayal seems to lean more on Tails' timidness, undercutting the assertiveness he earned through his past experiences. It almost feels like the character's growth was reset, missing the opportunity to evolve into a more mature and self-reliant hero. And unfortunately, this is not the first time I've seen this type of regression, as Ash Ketchum from the Pokemon series had this exact same issue when the Pokemon Black and White anime came out, for example. Vocally, Corkery brings a higher pitch and softer tone than his predecessors, which helps emphasize Tails' younger age in Heroes. This version of Tails sounds much more like a kid than before, and that's not necessarily a bad thing in the context of the game like Sonic Heroes. His enthusiasm and loyalty are all still present, but there's definitely less of that edge or self-assuredness that Connor brought to the role, for example. Corkery's Tails worked best when playing off the other characters, especially Sonic, where his optimism and excitement for adventure came through very clearly. However, what's lacking in Corkery's performance is the emotional weight that was really what made Connor's Tails stand out. While Sonic Heroes wasn't aimed to have the same level of storytelling depth as the adventure games, there were still plenty of moments where Tails could have had shined more as an independent character. Instead, Corkery's portrayal leans more into the supportive, almost childlike side of Tails, which, while cute, can feel like a bit of a step back when comparing it to his previous outings. Tails' music in Sonic Heroes also plays into this lighter tone. His theme, once again titled Believe in Myself, now reflects a more carefree and adventurous spirit rather than the personal growth and confidence we saw in Sonic Adventure 2. Corkery's voice aligns with this shit, but it does make me wish we got to see more of that maturity that had been building up in Tails all the way from before. All in all, while Corkery's Tails may not carry the same emotional depth as Connor's, it's a performance that fits the tone of Sonic Heroes perfectly, and it gives us a lighter, more energetic Tails who works well within the team-based gameplay, even if it lacks some of the character growth we'd come to expect. Still, it's a memorable portrayal in its own right, and although I'm not a big fan of William Corkery's version of Tails, I do believe it still has its charm. When it comes to the current voice actor for Tails, Colleen O'Shaughnessey, let's just say it's been a bit of a rocky road. While Sonic's most recent outing in Frontiers has Tails showing some improvement, there's no denying that her portrayal of Tails just hasn't hit the same emotional chords or brought the depth that the character really needs. Tails already established himself as a self-confident hero all the way back in 1999, so you want me to believe that 23 years later and he hasn't learned shit? Going back to Colleen as a voice actor, one of the main issues I have with her performances is that in the earlier games like Sonic Forces and Sonic Lost World, Tails felt super flat, almost lifeless at times. The emotional range just wasn't there. We're talking about a character who's been through it all, from battling alongside Sonic to holding his own intense situations. Even Kate Higgins had a bit more sass in her delivery in Sonic Colors. Yet, with Colleen, her voice often didn't sell those high-stake moments or the emotional weight that the Tails character really carries. Take Sonic Forces as another example. Tails is supposed to be going through this massive crisis after Sonic's been presumed dead, and yet the delivery lacked the urgency, desperation, or even the strength that a moment like that needed. Instead of hearing a Tails that's heartbroken or determined to fight back, we got a performance that felt oddly detached, and frankly one that's disappointing to see what the Fox has become.
Chaos! Sonic, help me!
Brother, this guy stinks!
And Sonic Lost World? Well, that's just another example of where the voice really didn't seem to match the character's circumstances. In that game, there were moments where Tails was supposed to be stepping up, even going as far as questioning Sonic's decisions like teaming up with Eggman, which could have been a real turning point for the character, but the delivery was so monotone and passive that it didn't really carry any real weight. You don't get the sense that Tails is challenging Sonic in many means, or even standing his own ground. It was a missed opportunity for the actor to show more depth and range, and instead it just came off as bland. But to be fair, I will admit that she's getting better. Sonic Frontiers is a noticeable step up. For the first time in a while, there's more emotion in her performance, more of an effort to show that Tails as a character has been evolving, just like the rest of the cast. There's a scene that really stands out for me in Sonic Frontiers where Tails actually talks about his fears and doubts, even the thoughts of being useless, and you can actually hear a bit more vulnerability coming from this performance. It's not perfect, but it's definitely a move in the right direction. You can tell she's working on bringing out the layers in Tails' personality, and that's encouraging. Still, it feels like there's a gap between what she's trying to do with the character and what Tails needs in order to shine. Tails is an incredibly smart, brave, and loyal character who's been by Sonic's side through everything. He's had his moments of heroism and doubt, and his voice should reflect all that complexity. But even in her better performance like within the Sonic movies, the energy just doesn't match up to the stakes. It's improving, but when you compare it to past performances like Connor Bringas or even Amy Pallant, you really can't help but feel like something's missing. In short, while she's still showing signs of improvement like in Sonic Frontiers, there's still a lot of work that I really do think needs to be done. Tails deserves a voice that can capture his full emotional range, his bravery, his intelligence, and yes, even his fears. Hopefully with time we'll see more growth in her portrayal, but for now, it just doesn't quite hit the mark like some of the voices that came beforehand. The voice inconsistency for Tails over the years is a clear reflection of Sega's shifting priorities in the Sonic franchise, often sacrificing character continuity in different tones and for mainly just the target audience. Each new portrayal seems to align more with the immediate needs of the game's tone rather than focusing on Tails' established personality and growth. While some actors like Corey and Connor Bringas help establish Tails as a brave, independent character, others like William Corkery saw him regress into a more childlike sidekick role, undoing much of his earlier development. This inconsistency has not only affected fans' connection to the character, but has also contributed to an overall sense of inconsistency in Tails. Like, to me it doesn't make sense that, as a child, he could beat Chaos 6, but he's struggling against Chaos 0 years later? Colleen O'Shaughnessey's portrayal shows signs of improvement in Sonic Frontiers, but earlier performances lack the emotional depth needed for Tails' complex character arc, especially in high-stake moments. Ultimately, the constant recasting has hindered Tails' growth as a character and created a fragmented sense of identity across different games, leaving fans to wonder which version of Tails they'll encounter next. Moving forward, consistency in both the writing and the voice direction is essential to restoring Tails to his true potential as the confident and lovable character we all know him as, giving him the stability he deserves as a key figure in the Sonic series. Hey, and welcome to the end of the video. Socials to my Twitter, Twitch, and Discord will be in the description down below if that interests you. Huge thank you to all my members of the channel, and thank you guys for even giving me a dime. If you want to have your name be at the end of the videos, make sure you press that join button right next to the subscribe button, which you should also totally press, by the way, because guess what? It's free, and it doesn't cost you anything, and if you regret it for whatever reason, you can always come back and unsubscribe later. Thank you all so much for watching, and have a good one.